I'm Suda and welcome to my channel where I share experiences with food and travel. Today I'm going to go over 10 things that you should know before you go to Paris and London. To preface this, I am not an expert. This is from my own experience and things I wish I knew before I went on my trip. So this is a user-friendly guide to what to expect on your next trip to Paris and London. I'm not going to go over the totally obvious things like what to pack and how to pick your flights or whatnot. I'm going to tell you extremely helpful tips on how to really get around. Like, what am I doing here? And things like Wi-Fi, transportation, currency exchange, and taxes. Also, side note, I am an iPhone user, so a lot of these tips are going to be geared towards the iPhone. Sorry, Android users. So let's get started. The most important thing you need to do to prepare in advance of traveling outside of your country is to get your money straight. You don't want to get stuck having to exchange at a higher rate or using your card and getting charged an exorbitant rate once you return. So let's not do that. The first thing you need to do is understand how money is used in the location that you're going to. Luckily for both Paris and London, I knew people that lived there and they were able to give me an idea on how they use their money on a daily basis. So in Paris, they use euros, and in London, they use pounds. Two different currencies and different rates of exchange. So before I went on my trip, I did exchange about 100 Canadian dollars into euros. Or I can't remember, maybe it was like 100 euros. Anyways, I went to Paris with some cash. That's because I figured, we would be going to cafes or buying little souvenirs here and there. So it would be nice to have a couple euros to use in those cases. However, I really didn't find that I needed to use them. In fact, by the end of the trip, I was like trying to find excuses to use the euros that I brought, because everywhere we went, they took cards or like tap, right? Same thing with London. I actually did not exchange any pounds. The person that we knew that lived there told us, like, you can go anywhere and just use your phone to tap to pay. So I went to Paris and London with barely any cash on me. Now, when I say tap, the app that we used was Wise. I would highly recommend this app if you were traveling outside of your country. So all you do on the app is you can link it to your bank account and transfer money over. You can convert it to pretty much any currency you want. And the rates are pretty good and the fees are really low. If I were to compare it to my bank, I would say Wise was just so much better. You can have the option of adding the card to your Apple Wallet or even ordering a physical card. Now, I would suggest, if you do want the physical card, to order it a few weeks in advance, because it might take a while to get to you. Otherwise, you can definitely use your phone. I didn't have a physical card when I went to Paris and London, and I was able to use my phone to tap pretty much everywhere I went. The other great thing about Wise is it shows a transaction history, so you can always look back and see where you spent your money and how much you spent. And also you could transfer money over. Like, for instance, we would go somewhere with my friends and maybe one of us would pay for everything, and then we could just easily transfer the money over to each other through Wise. Also, if you find that you need more money and you want to transfer it over from your actual bank account, it happens almost instantly. So I would highly recommend using the Wise app. Okay, next you're going to need data for your trip. If your phone provider has a travel plan and you feel safe using that, then definitely use it. I've done it in the past. However, it can get pretty expensive if you're going for longer than just like a couple of days. So for my trip to Paris and London, I used an eSIM. The one I used was Airalo, but it is an eSIM that you download an app onto your phone, and it's really great. You can use it. I've used it in the States. I used it in Europe, and it worked really great. The only thing is that there is a bit of a learning curve to figure out how to install it and then activate it. So I'm going to link a video that I use pretty much every time I go, because I don't travel that often, so I kind of forget what to do each time, but I follow this video every time and it works really great. And you can pick how many gigs you want. Yeah, it works really great. I can't recommend it enough. Okay, next is your travel adapters and voltage converters. Now, there is a difference between the two, so pay attention here because it's really important. Now, I will say Paris and London use different plugs than here in Canada. In France, they use a 230 volt supply voltage I don't know, I guess that's how you say it. They also use a type C and E power plugs and sockets. So for my trip, I did bring some of these kind of plugs. It's just straight up, you just plug it in to whatever socket that you have there, and then the other side you'll be able to then plug in your whatever electronics that you're using. Now you should be able to get away with just getting like one of these things. However, if you're going to be bringing anything that requires a higher voltage, for example, like a hair straightener, curling iron, then you're going to want something that has a higher voltage converter. So for my trip, I ordered one of these bad boys because I learned from my first trip to Paris when I tried to use like a plug like this with my straightener and it killed my straightener. And I was in Paris, or I was in France for like 2 weeks without anything to style my hair. So I had to just have puffy hair and put my hair up the whole time. So I learned the second time I went that I needed to get like a converter, voltage converter. So I got one of these. These are great because it has like options. Like this one says Australia, US, UK, EU, and like, you can pull it up and then it has the plug that you need in the country that you're going to, which was great. To be honest, before I went, I didn't realize that there was a different plug in the UK. I just kind of assumed they had the same as in Paris, which is definitely not the case. So what I did was before I went, I checked my curling iron that I was bringing to see what the voltage was on it. And then before I ordered this thing, I wanted to see if it would work properly. So I just checked to see if the voltages were like within the same range, and they were. So I was good. I did bring this and I was safe. My curling iron has survived and I'm still able to use it. However, I will say, I don't know about a hair dryer, to be honest. They do have a pretty high voltage. I don't use a hair dryer very often. So I didn't have that issue, but my friends that did go, they had hair dryers and also like the brush that the styling brush that like blows air out, and they died on them because they actually did use this thing, but because it's so much more powerful, it killed my converter. We had to order another converter while we were there. And like in Paris, we stayed at a hotel, so we just used the hair dryer that was there. However, when we went to London, we were staying at a friend's place and they didn't have a hair dryer. So I don't remember what my friend ended up doing. I know in Paris, when her hair dryer died, she ordered another one, and it had like the France plug. However, when we went to London, I'm not too sure what happened, but either way, look into your voltage, make sure you have the correct converter. These little guys are really good. You can buy them on Amazon. I think I forget how much it was, maybe like $20, $30. So it's not too bad. And you can bring it with you to other countries. Okay, so next is what kind of luggage to bring. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about what you should pack, but luggage is really important. Because if you're going to be traveling to different areas of Europe, or I guess anywhere really, you don't want to be lugging around a giant bag. So we went over to Europe with just carry-ons. We went for a week. It was in the summer. It was definitely doable. Now, I will say I always travel with carry-on. I can't remember the last time. I think maybe the first trip I ever took, I brought a checked baggage, but after that, I was always a carry-on. I have like the carry-on luggage that I have. I've been able to bring that straight onto the plane, no problem, whenever I travel to the States or even down south. However, this time when I went over to Paris and London, they wouldn't let me use my carry-on. They said it was too big. The thing that they make you measure your luggage, it's so small. Like, I don't know who is bringing that small of a carry-on. However, the cool thing was that even though they made us check our baggage, I was doing it at the gate. So when I got off the plane, my baggage was right there when I got off the plane. So I didn't have to wait for like at the carousel for my baggage to come, which I guess is sort of like a neat hack. However, it was kind of annoying how every time I got on the plane, I did have to check my carry-on. However, the only time I did not have to check it was when I was flying from London back home. Now, I don't know if it's because I was flying back home and they didn't care, or because they actually upgraded me to business randomly, which was awesome. So yeah, that was the only time I didn't have to check it. But other than that, I did have to check it every time. So I would say before you go on your flight, check the dimensions. But if you can bring a carry-on, definitely bring it, because you don't want to be lugging that thing around. You know, lots of places in Europe have cobbled streets. I'll tell you a story. The first time I went to France, I brought my checked bag. This told you, the first trip I ever took. That was the first trip I ever took. I didn't know anything, right? And I had to lug that thing from like the bottom of Lyon all the way to the top. And by the end of it, and it was all cobbled streets. And by the end of it, not even by the end of it, actually, halfway up the journey, the wheels died on me. So I had to carry my checked baggage through the city. It was horrible. So I guess maybe I have some sort of post-traumatic stress from that. So that's why I just don't bring a checked baggage with me anymore. So speaking of luggage, let's talk about the walkability and accessibility of both cities, Paris and London. Now, Paris, we basically walked everywhere. Things are really close there. Like if you're a tourist, you're going to be sticking around probably central part of the city. So you can definitely walk everywhere there. We did do public transportation like once while we were there, but other than that, we really were walking everywhere. So I would suggest to bring your comfiest walking shoes. I brought flats, the Vivea ones, and they were decent. However, I would take breaks, lean heavily on wearing those shoes the whole trip that you're there. So I rotated between wearing those. I brought my gazelles as well. And there was one day where I did wear like flat sandals, but I wouldn't recommend that because you're trying to walk around and they're slipping and sliding off of you. It's not working. We did bring heels because we thought like, oh, we're going to go out at night and we'll be able to wear heels. No, the first night we did that, like we were immediately regretting it. And we ended up going back to the hotel to change our shoes. And then we just didn't end up going back out because we were back home by then. So yeah, definitely bring comfortable shoes. So other than walking, let's talk about how else you're going to get around. Public transportation. So in Paris, they have the metro, and there's a lot of stairs there. Paris is an old city, okay? So there's a lot of stairs everywhere, not just in the subway stations, but everywhere you go. So the other thing about the metro in Paris, it's pretty old and it's not the cleanest, I would say. Their ticketing system as well. You want to pay attention to the entrance that you're taking when you go into the metro, because it will tell you if there is like an attendant or if there's like a ticket machine or if it's just a straight up entry for people that already have like a pass or tickets or whatnot. So if you don't have any of those, you want to pick the one where you can either go to an attendant or go to a machine. So when we took it, we just paid the machine and then they gave us like the tiniest little ticket. We used that to get onto the metro. However, if you are going to be leaning very heavily on taking the metro in Paris, you might want to download their app. The app is called Bonjour, RATP. And on that, they have like a Navigo Easy where you can, I guess, load money into it and then you can use that to pay. We did not use that at the time. We just used the machines and we were okay. And honestly, we only took it maybe one day where we were going further out. Other than that, we just literally walked everywhere. Now in London, we used the underground all day, every day while we were there because things are not as close as they are in Paris. Everything's kind of spread out. It's a pretty big city, and all the different neighborhoods that you want to hit up as a tourist or first timer, they're in different areas. So we used the underground quite a bit while we were there. However, we were able to just use our phones. So I had that Wise app on my Apple Wallet, and I was able to use my phone to pay every time we went onto the underground. Now, the way it works there is, they have different lines that you take, but it tracks what lines you take, how far you're going, so that when you go to exit, you do have to scan again, and then it will charge you. Paris and London, I use the City Mapper app. This app is great because it will take into account the subway lines that you're taking, which ones are going to be the fastest, which ones will be cheaper either. It actually tells you how much your trip's going to be if you take the route that they suggest. And it also, it's pretty up to date, I would say. Like it tells you when the next train's going to be coming, and I found it pretty accurate. It was great. So highly recommend using the City Mapper app, and it works well in Paris and London. Now, going from Paris to London, very popular route. That's what we did. A lot of people take the train under the channel, or the, is it still called the channel? I don't know. The English Channel. That's what I thought we were going to end up doing. But when I looked at the prices, the ticket from Paris to London was going to be like maybe 250 Canadian. But when I looked at the flight from Paris to London, it was only like $80. So we ended up taking a flight. The flight was about, I think it was under an hour, like maybe 45-minute flight. The thing I didn't take into account was like having to travel to the airport, going through the whole rigmarole, and you end up going maybe a couple hours before your flight and then afterwards when you get off, right? So I didn't really take that into account. However, there is a time change between Paris and London. They're about an hour apart. London is an hour behind Paris. So by the time we, if you take into account the flight and everything, and by the time we got to London, we really didn't, it didn't feel like you lost time because you kind of went back in time. So taking a flight is fine. Also, like the airport, Charles de Gaulle in Paris, it's the terminal that you use, or at least that we went, is so small. It's not big, right? Heathrow was a huge airport, but in Paris it's small. So it's not like you're spending too much time, or you're not wasting so much time at the airport. So definitely flight is an option, whichever's cheaper, right? Okay, next let's talk about the environment and the culture while you're there. First off, the weather. Weather is really important. It's important because you think, I'll just check the weather app before I go and, plan my outfits or whatever accordingly. That's not the case. Now with Paris, I'd say the climate is pretty similar to, I live in like Toronto, Canada. So I find that the Paris climate is very similar to Toronto, minus, whatever winter, they probably have less snow. Or I don't know what their snow situation is there. But their summer weather and their fall weather is very similar. There was no issues there, However, London is a different story, okay? Because when we would look at the weather app before going there, I saw, everything's like in the high teens. And, it's cloudy here and there, a little bit of rain, but like whatever. So all I brought was like cute outfits, dresses and shorts and stuff like that. And I brought a sweater. However, I didn't take into account the rain, all those nursery rhymes about like the London rain and London fog is very true. Also, I never understood when I would look at pictures of like little Prince George wearing his sweater and his shorts. I was like, I don't understand what the weather is like there. But I found myself wearing the same thing when I was there because it would be like sunny, like it would say, it's in the high teens, but then it would be very muggy, humid, and then it would rain, and then not only rain, but be windy and gloomy, right? So then it would suddenly get really cold. And I found when we were in London, I was just like cold. Actually, the first day we were there, it was sunny, but the second and third day, it was raining the whole time. And we were just basically miserable everywhere we went. Also, the other thing too is that you think it's raining, so you bring an umbrella, right? I don't think that's enough, honestly. I wish I had brought like a raincoat or like a poncho because not only is it raining, but it's windy. And our umbrellas were just like not helping. If anything, I found myself just not using an umbrella and just walking around without one because it would rain, but it wasn't like a downpour. It was almost like drizzle. So drizzle and windy. So I was like, you know what? I'd rather just get wet from the rain and not have to, struggle with an umbrella, like constantly flipping in and out on me or breaking on me. Actually, my friend's umbrella broke on her and we had to buy an umbrella while we were there. So this is your warning about the London rain. It is real. So the language barrier question is probably more of a thing in Paris. Now, I have basic French. Over here in Ontario, we have to learn French from grade 1 to grade 9. However, I didn't do French immersion. So there's core and French, okay? I did core, which is you're just learning basic French. So I can read it. I can kind of understand it. I can sort of get by, but not enough to, enter into a place and just start talking in French. So with my basic French, I think that's enough to get by in Paris. Like you hear stories of like them being really snobby about you, speaking English. But honestly, like if you're staying in a lot of the touristy areas, you can get by with speaking English. So it's just the same. Anywhere you go where they're going to be speaking a different language than what you're used to, you want to learn the basic stuff like hello, goodbye, thank you, please, excuse me, those sort of things. And I found that like if you just entered in that way, like just bonjour, during the day, bonsoir in the evening, they're pretty cool with that, So like the first time I went to France, I went with my sisters, like it was just us, like tourists. And I don't know, I did kind of find it a bit of a culture shock because we did face like quite a bit of racism there, and we do have family that live in France, and they said, yeah, that's like normal. Like people are gonna like just straight up like point out that, oh, like you're Asian or whatever, right? However, this time when I went, I didn't really notice that. Now that it's been about 14, 15 years between both trips, so maybe things have changed. I don't know. Also, this time when we went, we did meet up with our friend who is from here but moved to Paris, and she learned French while living there. So she kind of did help us get around the times that she was with us. But yeah, I don't know if that was the difference there, okay? Now with London, clearly they speak English there, so you can definitely get around. The thing that did actually surprise me about London was that it is, well, not this part. Okay, so what surprised me about London is that I expected when we were going to go there, we would be hearing a lot of like British English accents. But London's a very multicultural, diverse city. So there are people from all over the world there. And I just found that I didn't really come across like what I thought I was gonna be hearing a lot of the time. And also the London accent is pretty mild compared to other areas of Britain. So yeah, I actually didn't, like, it wasn't hard to understand anyone that did have, a British accent or whatever there. That was a big surprise to me, to be honest. Okay, so next let's talk about the food and the culture. So my big thing about when I travel is I want to eat the food that is popular in that area. Now with Paris, it definitely does have all the stereotypical things that you expect. It's a big cafe culture. There's a lot of like patisseries and boulangeries there. So you can definitely walk around and do like a foodie tour, just buying, little things to eat here and there as you go. Now I will say, like, if you're going to sit down for dinner, their dining culture is like totally different than over here in Canada, where like you're not going to expect to go into a restaurant and have a meal and be out real quick. Okay. They like to sit there and relax and like, go through all the courses, right? You're going to have your appetizers, you're going to have your main entree, you're going to have your dessert, then you're going to have like an espresso, and then you're going to have like drinks in between. So it's like a whole situation. Definitely not like over here where you want to get in and out, right? That is not the case over there. Also, no tipping. They don't tip there. The most you can do is maybe like round your bill. So like if, it's like, I don't know, 151.56 cents, then you might want to round it up to like, I don't know, 152 or 155 or whatever, right? Like that's normal. But honestly, they don't really do tipping in Paris. There was one weird situation where we went to a restaurant and we wanted to just order like an app and like an entree and like share it because we had just landed, we were jet lagged, but we were hungry. And they actually made us order more. I don't know if that's like a thing. Like I didn't see that anywhere else that we went to go eat in Paris, but they made us order more. So we ended up having to order like 2 more dishes and we couldn't even eat it all. And it was like the most expensive meal that we had there. So yeah, I don't know if that's a thing, but we came across that. Another interesting thing about Paris is that or France in general, their food is really good. Actually, I think that's the case with even in London, London, the Indian food is really good, right? So basically anywhere where they colonized, that food is going to be really good there. So that's a, thing that you probably would not expect when you're going to Paris. So where Paris is a big cafe culture, it's normal to walk down the street. You see a lot of people sitting outside on the streets, and a lot of the cafes will have their chairs all just like facing in a row because people like to just sit and people watch. on the streets. So that's very common in Paris. Also smoking. It's been a while since I've been around so much cigarette smoking and not just vaping. And that's definitely normal if you want to sit and smoke. I don't think they do it inside the restaurants anymore, but if you're sitting outside on the street, people do it all the time. So that's something to kind of keep in mind when going to Paris. So where Paris is a cafe culture, London is very pub culture. So it's very normal to go out and then around like 5 or 6 o'clock, everybody gets off work and they all meet at the pub, and there's streets full of people just standing around drinking their big mugs of beer outside on the street. And like you'll see people in suits wearing like their work bags, holding a pint of beer and having a smoke outside on the streets, just standing around outside on the streets. So that was really fun to see, actually. Now in London, tipping is customary, but the percentages are not as high here. I don't know about you, but everywhere I go now, like the default tipping is like starting at, some of them are starting at like 18%. That used to be what you would tip people if they did an exceptional service for you, right? However, I found like in London, like a lot of the tipping would just be about like 10%, 15%, which used to be the norm over here. I don't know what's going on, guys. So yeah, the service and dining culture is kind of similar as it was in Paris, but maybe a little bit more quick to go kind of thing, because London's a very much like city where people are always on the go. So that's a bit of the differences there. Now, things to do. Before we went, we used Get Your Guide. Get Your Guide has a lot of interesting tours and like admission stuff that you want to do. You can definitely use Get Your Guide for. We didn't do too many touristy type activities. We kind of just like wandered around a lot at the cities that we went to. For Paris, I used Get Your Guide for the evening cruise on the Seine, the river. So I would highly recommend that. That was really nice way to see the city. And in London, I used it to get admission tickets into Kensington Palace. And I think like they are pretty decent prices. And I didn't have any issues using the tickets once we got to the areas that we went to. And I just used the app on my phone. Yeah, Get Your Guide for Paris and London for sure. Hey, so another thing that you might be doing on these trips is some shopping. And when it comes to shopping, you're going to want to know about the taxes and customs. So Paris is a really good place to buy like your luxury items, because even with the exchange rate, once you do the tax refund, you end up, like we found that we were getting some pretty decent deals. We were able to save like a couple $100s on some items that we purchased. So, you know, for myself, I bought a Polen bag in Paris. When it was there, it was about 350 euros. But if I were to buy it in Canada, it would be over 500 Canadian. When I did the tax return, I got 100 euros back. So I was able to save about $100 there, like at the end, you know, if you take into account the taxes that you would be paying in Canada or in Ontario as well too. So now how that works. So in Paris, they have the VAT, which is the value added tax. So although the standard VAT rate is about 20%, tourists can't get the full 20% back. You'll probably get about like 10 to 12% back. Now there is a minimum purchase threshold for the VAT return, and it's about 100 euros. So if you're going to be buying like an item I think that's like a total 100 euros, but you know, I don't know if it's worth it to do. So yeah, I don't know if it's worth it to do if you're just buying a bunch of things that equal up to 100. I definitely just used it on things that I like, actual items that I spent over $100 on. Now, a lot of the luxury stores that you might go to and the department stores as well, they have like, you can do the tax return there. So at Polen, when I purchased it, they filled out the form for me, and then I just had to hold on to the form and the receipt, go to the airport, find the kiosk, and you can claim it on there. And then you'll get your refund within a couple weeks once you get home. Some of the bigger department stores like, Galeries Lafayette, they have a designated area for that. So, you know, once you're done all your shopping, you go over there, you it's very easy. Just kind of like click some buttons on the machine. It gives you your form, you use your receipt, and then yeah, you're good to go. Now with London, there is no VAT refund. So we didn't do any luxury shopping while we were in London. Also, the pound is so much higher than the euro. So, but however, I found that we did probably more shopping in London just because the style, I mean, they have a colder climate there. So a lot of the clothes we found we liked more in London. So we ended up buying more, just like regular clothes here and there in London and more luxury shopping in Paris. So I hope you found these tips helpful. I found that before I went, I did a whole bunch of research, but I didn't find too much on a lot of these topics that I brought up. So if there's anything you want me to elaborate more on, or if you're looking for other tips on your upcoming Paris and London trip, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, have a beautiful day and I'll see you in the next one. Au revoir!